So if you've forgotten or if you're new and you're not aware, what you're going to do is go ahead and log into your Eduphoria, and all of this stuff is going to be located in Strive. And I'm using a teacher's account right now so that you can see what it looks like from your end. So important due dates that you need to know as of right now are the 13th of September 2019 is when your initial skills profile is due. The 27th of September 2019 is when your initial goals are due. And then your target skills profile is due November 15th, 2019. So the first thing that we're going to walk you through are writing your goals. So this teacher has several goals in from years past, but what we're going to do is go ahead and make a new one. Now, you can remove old goals if you'd like to, although I would not recommend it if you're a returning teacher. So a couple things you need to know about your goals, or in case you've forgotten, you may have some of this written out, but it's always good to go back over it. One thing is goals cannot be something that is required by your job description. So if you say, I want to turn in my lesson plans on time, that's not really an appropriate goal because it's already something that's minimally required for you for your job. So you want it to be something that actually grows you as a professional. It needs to be something that is specific, measurable, and time-bound. So for example, you've probably heard the term SMART goals. And I'll give you some examples. So some good ones that I've had over the years are things like, I want to make 2 positive phone calls at home a week in order to reinforce good behavior, or I want to read this certain book on instructional strategies and I want to try to implement them in my class and provide evidence for that. Or things like, I want to try a different strategy once a week from the Lead Forward strategy playlist and implement it in my class, or I want to implement the station rotation model in my class this year once every 2 weeks. It can be something that you develop with your team and then get feedback from your appraiser. But if you're not sure what your goal should be, I would say always meet with your appraiser first, and they can kind of give you some ideas of what that looks like. So your start date, whatever it defaults to is fine. When it will be completed, I would go ahead and enter mid-May. Just because by that point, you're going to have had your summative conference anyway. So I'm going to say May 8th, which is actually a terrible day because it's probably a STAR test. So let's go with the 15th. Right here, you're going to type out your goal. And then the next box is, how will you know that you've accomplished your goal? What will that success look like? You're going to put descriptors here. And ideally, you're going to put something that is product related, meaning, so if your goal was implementing strategies from the Lead Forward playlist, you're going to want to show that I tried this goal this week and this is how it looked, and this goal this week. And then down here, what standards does it address? So how is it tied to TTESS? So is it something that is communication in class, or is it something that is managing student behavior with positive phone calls? It's something that is classroom culture. And please don't forget, I have a lot of people that do goals and they kind of forget about the fourth domain, which is professional demeanor, goal setting, being involved in the school community in ways that are extending beyond the classroom. And then under actions, what tasks are required for this goal to be complete? Say that you wanted to be someone who put in that you implemented positive phone calls. Then you may want to take an action here and describe how you created a tracking system, or how you made sure that you hit kids equitably with those phone calls, whatever that would look like for you. So you need at least 2. And again, if you have any questions about whether or not your goal is appropriate, always refer to your appraiser first. And then if you still have questions, I would say you're more than welcome to contact me or Dr. Edison or anybody else on campus that you feel like might be helpful, because we do want these to be meaningful for you guys and not just something that you do because you have to. So that is the first part of goals. Now, the other thing too, if you're new to TTESS, you're going to have something called goal setting and professional development. And that's something that your appraiser will walk you through. You have to complete that by the 27th of September or 6 weeks after your original hire date, whichever is later. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is the student learning objective, or the SLO is what we call it all the time. The student learning objective includes a learning goal for your students, an initial skills profile, and a target skills profile, and then also a tracking document. I'm going to walk you guys through it, and it seems very overwhelming at first, but I promise it is not that bad at all. So we're going to look at this teachers from last year. One thing that's important to note is when you turn it in, now it's from last year so you won't see it, or when you're working on it, there's a button that says save and submit. Now this teacher is already submitted to me here, so once you save it and press submit, you can continue to go back and press that again. That way it updates for your appraiser and they can see that. So the first piece is step one. What's my focus for the SLO? Before we get into all the pieces that need to be complete, I want to walk you guys through kind of how to look at this as an overall goal, because sometimes teachers will look at it a little bit too narrowly, if that's a word, and it makes it even more challenging for them. So the easiest thing to do, I found, is align your student learning objective with a processing standard in your course. So for this teacher, they are an English language arts teacher, and one of the processing standards in that course is inferencing. Now, for them, they also have a lot of writing, and that is something that persists throughout the course. So you want to do processing standard or a skill that persists throughout the course, meaning it shows up all the time, because that's going to be a lot easier for you to track. So for English, they did the writing process. However, last year, biology built their student learning objectives around, I believe it was 2G, which is a processing standard in their course. And that standard talks about a student's ability to collect and organize and interpret qualitative and quantitative data. So basically, when you are writing your student learning objective or skill that you're going to have them focus on, you want it to be something that you can pick up evidence for throughout the entire year. You don't want to narrow in on one small thing and then be panicked because you don't have evidence. So I'll give you a quick example. It would not make sense for biology teachers to hone in on, genetics. Although they might spiral that standard through the course, it's not something that they're going to be doing repeatedly enough that they would be able to pick up the evidence of their student learning objective. So the first thing you're going to have to do is identify the content area. So for you, it will probably say, she put the writing process here, you can put the writing process in English language arts or whatever the general content area and focus is. Now, what's the student learning objective skill focus statement? So what do you want them to be able to do? Students will be able to, and this teacher wrote, consistently write cohesive and coherent responses to a given stimulus with limited grammar mistakes. So that's their goal. What led to the decision to focus on this content area? Here's where you're going to describe what made you pick this. Now, it's probably something that the students struggle with and something that you see repeatedly in the course. And so you're going to put a little descriptor there of why you feel like it's important for you to focus on this. And then right here, what TEKs correspond with these skills. So you probably will have at least a few TEKs that correspond with this skill here, okay? This step 2 is going to be your what's called initial skills profile. And this one is the part that is due by September 13th. The initial skills profile is really confusing for a lot of people because it looks very similar, and a lot of people think it's the same thing as the target skills profile. So your initial skills profile is a beginning of the year rubric for students, meaning students' abilities at the beginning of the course, versus the target skills profile is students' abilities at the end of the course. So just to look through this really quickly, this teacher said a typical student, and this is the initial skills profile, so a typical student at the beginning of the year, with moderate assistance, student is able to construct a somewhat adequate written response. So if you're someone who is used to tracking data in a very finite and focused way, these descriptors might feel a little bit vague to you, and that's okay. That took me a while to kind of get through that. From here, you add descriptors for above typical and well above typical students, and then you also are going to add descriptors for below typical and well below typical students. Sometimes teachers struggle with writing those descriptors, and the thing I always tell them is you can always write the descriptors with the frequency of assistance that the students need. So an above typical student at the beginning of the year is not going to need a lot of assistance and is able to construct an adequate written response, versus a well above typical student is able to construct a written response with little to no assistance. So this rubric, this step 2, which is called the initial skills profile, is the piece that is due on September 13th. The goals are not due till the 27th. Now, eventually you will go in and put in the number of students at each level. Now, I will tell you at what date that is in a little bit when I find out exactly when that is. But right now you just need to focus on making sure that that initial skills profile is written. Now, at this point, those are the 2 pieces that you need to complete for the September due dates. But I'm going to do a brief overview of what's coming so that you kind of have an idea of where the SLO process is going. Also, additionally, you're going to say who's going to be included in your SLO or your student learning objective. Pick a class period for this. And then you're also going to have to identify what student work did you use to map students to the initial skills profile or rank them. And that's the next piece I'm going to show you. Again, I don't have a specific date on by when you need the students mapped to that initial skills profile, but I will show you what that looks like. So what you're going to do to rank those students to the initial skills profile after you write it is you'll come over here to your shared drives and you'll go to the hub. And I've put in a blank student learning objective tracker. It's the same one that we used last year. And what you're going to have to do, because this is a master copy, is file, make a copy, and you're going to have to put it wherever you want in your own drive, because you're not going to be able to edit this one, and we don't want you to, because we don't want a lot of people working on the same document. So once you write your initial skills profile, you will list the students' names here for the class that you want to work with, and then you're going to come in and rank them against your initial skill profile. So were they well above typical, typical, below, or well below? And you're ranking them based on whatever piece of evidence that you put right here. So what student work did you initially rank them to that initial skills profile rubric? Now, in November, you're going to come in, and again, this is not due anytime soon, but in November, you're going to come in and you're going to write your target skills profile. And the easiest way to think of your target skills profile is your end of the year rubric. So while up here, you wrote a beginning of the year rubric for students' abilities at the beginning of the year, in November, you're going to come down here and write their abilities at the end of the year. This is challenging for people because they want to think that the typical student at the end of the year has the same descriptor as the typical student at the beginning of the year. And that's not the case. It's 2 different rubrics. So this descriptor right here at the end of the year, or the step 3 target skills profile rubric, is going to be a completely different descriptor than the one up here. And the reason why is because one is beginning of the year, one is end of the year, and you're hoping that the student made an adequate amount of growth. Now, I'm not going to go into step 4 yet, but I wanted to give you guys kind of an overview of what the goals look like and then the initial skills profile looked like. If you have any questions, please contact your appraiser first and they can walk you through the process. But hopefully this was a good refresher for most of you. For those of you that are new, it probably seems extremely overwhelming, and I promise it is something that is not, and it actually turns out to be incredibly helpful. But reach out to your appraiser first, and then if you still need help, you're more than welcome to contact me or a department leader that you work with or another teacher, and a lot of us will be able to help you and walk you through this process. One thing that I do want to mention is that people have asked me, can I use a test or a daily work or warm-ups to to count as evidence for my student learning objective? And the answer is yes, as long as whatever you're gathering measures that student focus statement, student learning objective focus statement, and the TEKS that are associated with it. So if you are someone who, for example, are an English teacher, it is totally appropriate for you to take those essays and scan them in and provide that as evidence. You could use exit tickets if it was something like that, and you could take a picture, but you do need to take pictures of each time that you rank students to the student learning student learning objective growth tracker. So every time you put a ranking on here, you kind of have to have a piece of evidence for it. Hopefully that helps you guys as you tackle this year. But again, if you need any help, don't hesitate to reach out.